My husband asked me to flash some roadworkers. I did, and then he got mad and pushed me out of the car next to them. How do we move on from this? We've been together for 10 years, married for 6, and lately, things have changed. Over the last 2 or 3 years, he's shown less and less interest in me. It's been frustrating because he still subscribes to a couple of OnlyFans accounts, which doesn't bother me much. I see it like corn. So I know he still has sexual urges. I've tried bringing it up with him a few times, letting him know that I'm getting bored and frustrated. I even told him I'm open to trying anything he wants to spice things up. But each time, he just gives me a duly noted and goes about his day, which leaves me feeling even more frustrated and ignored. A few nights ago, we had some friends over for tea, and the conversation turned to commutes and roadworks. Our friends were talking about how their commute time has more than doubled because of some long roadworks they have to pass through every day. Then, Carol, the wife of the couple, came in with something that caught me completely off guard. She said, "But we've found a way to make it more entertaining, haven't we?" And looked at her husband with a grin. They both started laughing, and I was so confused. Carol explained that the roadworks stretch for about 3 miles, with groups of workers spread out across 7 or 8 spots. They usually drive through at about 10 to 15 miles per hour, and whenever they approach one of the groups, her husband honks the horn and Carol flashes them. The workers cheer every time. I was absolutely stunned. They always seemed so straight-laced, but here they were, making a game out of it. I couldn't believe it. That night after our friends left, my husband surprised me by saying how brave Carol and her husband were for doing that flashing stunt. Then, out of nowhere, he suggested we should try it the next morning. I couldn't believe it. This is the same man who hated it when I posted a bikini picture on Facebook. I asked if he was sure, half joking, thinking he was just caught up in the moment. But he said yes, and to my surprise, he even initiated sex that night. We hadn't been intimate in months, and it was the first time in years that he had been the one to start things. I thought maybe this was his way of spicing things up, and I went along with it, hoping it might reignite our connection. The next morning, we were both off work, and as soon as he woke up, he brought up the flashing idea again. I asked if he was sure or if it was just some horny talk from the night before. I even brought up the point that maybe the workers wouldn't appreciate it. What if they didn't want to be flashed? But he was adamant, saying, "Trust me, all men want to be flashed." So we drove to the road with the construction work. As we approached a group of workers, he got all excited and giddy, like a kid, and asked, "Are you ready?" I hesitated, but then said yes. He honked the horn, and I lifted my top. Sure enough, the workers started cheering, and I couldn't help but laugh a little. We were moving along at about 10 miles per hour when, out of nowhere, he slammed on the brakes. My heart dropped as I tried to figure out what was happening. His face turned red with anger, and he suddenly screamed at me, "Get out, you fucking slag." I was in complete shock. Tears welled up as he leaned over, opened my door, and ripped off my seatbelt. He started pushing me out of the car, yelling so loudly that traffic behind us came to a standstill, with horns blaring. I could see the workers looking confused, and 2 of them rushed over to help. One of them shouted at my husband while the other tried to pull me from the car. I turned toward the workers for help, but that's when my husband shoved me so hard that I fell halfway out of the car, catching myself on my hands. One of the workers was already by my side, and he dragged me out of the car, telling me later that he thought my husband was going to drive off with me hanging out the door. My heart was racing, and the reality of what had just happened hit me like a ton of bricks. My husband just left me there on the side of the road, and I was still only wearing a vest top, pajama shorts, and my slippers since he had rushed us out to do this ridiculous stunt. My phone was in his car, and I didn't have my house keys either. I was standing there in complete shock with nothing. One of the workers, bless him, took off his jacket and wrapped me up in it. He and a couple of others led me to a nearby cabin they were using as a canteen, turned on the heater, and even made me a cup of tea. I was so embarrassed. In the span of 30 seconds, they'd seen my boobs, witnessed me getting abused, watched me fall out of a car, and then rescued me. I couldn't stop apologizing, telling them it was all his idea, but they kept telling me it was fine. One of them even said this sort of thing happens a few times a day, though I think they were just trying to make me feel better. They were all so sweet and funny, laughing and joking around to lighten the mood, which helped me calm down a bit. They asked if I wanted to call anyone, but I didn't even know anyone's number except for work, and there was no way I wanted them picking me up dressed like this from a building site, no less. I asked if I could just call a taxi, but one of the workers said I couldn't exactly get in a taxi looking like that. The man who seemed to be their team leader spoke up and told one of them to drive me wherever I needed to go. So I asked if they could take me to my mum's, which was about 5 miles away. They found me some spare work boots so I could walk across the muddy ground to the van, and 2 of them offered to drive me. They were so kind the whole way, making sure I was okay, checking on me, and even walking me right to my mum's front door. When my mum opened the door, I just broke down, completely hysterical. The workers explained to her that my husband and I had had an argument, and he left me by the side of the road. My mum, being the lovely woman she is, offered them something to drink, and I tried to give back the jacket and boots, but they told me to keep them. It was such a whirlwind of emotions, but those workers were true gentlemen through it all. I told my mum that my husband and I were just driving to McDonald's when we got into an argument. I didn't tell her the full story about the pushing or how it really went down. I just couldn't bring myself to say it. She didn't push for more details either. She drove me back home, and since she has a spare key, she let me in. I quickly packed a few things, enough to last me a while, and went back to my mum's place. When I got inside, I saw my phone sitting on the table, so I knew my husband had already been home while I was gone. It's been 5 days now, and in that time, he's been calling me non-stop, apologizing over and over, saying he doesn't know what came over him. Apparently, he heard someone shout "nice pair" at me when I flashed, and it made him so angry. He claims it just triggered something in him. I don't know how I feel about that excuse. My friends have all told me to leave him, while, unsurprisingly, his friends are telling me to give him another chance. I feel like I'm torn right down the middle, 50-50. If I do decide to stay, I know for sure I'm going to insist we do couples counseling and maybe even sex therapy, either for him or for both of us. But now he's saying he doesn't want to involve other people in our relationship, which is a red flag to me. I keep thinking about how silly it feels to throw everything away over a few seconds of madness. Maybe I should have just said no when he asked me to flash, knowing how insecure he can be. I got carried away because, honestly, I was just so happy to get some attention from him after so long. I thought maybe this would be the start of us reconnecting. As for the workers who helped me, I couldn't just leave it at that. I took their jacket and boots back to them, of course. But I also wanted to show my appreciation properly, so I made them 2 big cakes and bought them 1,000 bags of Yorkshire tea as a thank you. It's the least I could do after everything they did for me. They were so sweet and saved me from a really awful situation, and I'm forever grateful to them for that. Update: 1 day later. Something happened last week, and it made me realize that I no longer want to be with him. I've been holding on to this for a while, but what happened involved physical abuse. I do have photos and witnesses, but I just don't feel like involving the police. I know it's serious, and maybe I should, but I can't bring myself to go through with it right now. I guess I'm still trying to process everything. I bought the house back in 2012, and it's only in my name. He didn't move in until 2015. Ever since then, I've always paid the mortgage. His reasoning was that he wasn't going to put money into something he didn't own, which seemed fair enough at the time. We split all the other bills 50-50, and whenever I made any modifications to the house, I paid for it with proof of receipts. For any regular maintenance or repairs, we split the cost equally, which worked fine for the most part. Now that I've made up my mind about leaving, I know I need to talk to a solicitor, but I just wanted to figure out exactly where I stand first before taking that step. Google, of course, wasn't much help. Some places say he might have a right to half of the house since we'd been married for a few years now, while others say he doesn't because I bought the house before we got married. It's really confusing, and since we didn't sign a prenup or anything like that, I'm not sure how this will play out. I'm gonna have to face it eventually, but right now, I'm just trying to wrap my head around everything. It's hard to believe that this is where we've ended up after everything we've been through. But after what happened last week, I know I can't stay in this situation any longer. I just hope I can sort everything out smoothly and move on with my life. Update: 21 days later. I took the advice from people on this sub and a couple of others and decided to call the police to report the attack. Beforehand, I made sure to speak with the workers who were there during the incident, and they assured me they'd back me up if needed. So I went ahead and reported everything. The police arrested my husband, but after that, he was released on lease. The condition was that he couldn't stay at my house, so he's gone to live with his mum for the time being. After the argument, my husband tried to turn everything against me. He told all of our friends that I had cheated on him. I didn't really want to admit to people that I had flashed anyone because it was embarrassing. But I could feel the tide turning against me. People were actually believing his lies. So I decided to send a long message to everyone. I included a detailed description of exactly what happened that day, along with pictures of my injuries, the scrapes and bruises he caused. I even attached screenshots of messages he sent where he admitted to asking me to flash and also admitted to hitting me. He did, of course, try to shift the blame onto me, saying if I had just gotten out of the car when he asked, he wouldn't have had to hit me. A few people apologized after they read the message, but most of them didn't. Honestly, I don't care anymore. I needed to clear my name, and now I feel like I've done that. I'm back at home now, and my husband has to answer his lease in a couple of months. The police don't seem too confident about getting a conviction, but maybe that's just how they're supposed to sound, keeping expectations low or something. I've had a brief talk with a lawyer, but I'm not in a position to afford anything substantial right now, so that's been put on hold for the moment. It's been a rough few weeks, to say the least, but also a real eye-opener. I've learned a lot about who's truly there for me and who's not. I don't feel any guilt for getting the police involved, nor do I regret telling people the truth about what happened. Right now, I'm just focusing on work and keeping myself busy, trying to move forward one step at a time.